Sometimes it's not the moment your heart breaks that changes everything. It's the moment you realize it will never be whole in the same way again. And sometimes, the worst pain doesn't come from a stranger's betrayal. It comes from the people who promised they never would. I still remember the exact moment my world shattered into a million pieces. It wasn't when I found the text messages. It wasn't even when I noticed the strange looks my sister-in-law, Rachel, kept giving me at family dinners. It was on a Thursday afternoon at my gynecologist's office, when Dr. Adams looked at me with those sympathetic eyes that doctors reserve for delivering devastating news. "I'm sorry, Megan. The test results are conclusive. Your inability to conceive isn't temporary. It's a condition called premature ovarian failure." I remember staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the little dots while my vision blurred. 4 years of trying, 4 years of temperature tracking, fertility treatments, disappointing pregnancy tests, and now this. "There are other options," Dr. Adams continued, her voice gentle. "Donor eggs, adoption." But all I could think about was how I would tell Daniel, my husband of 9 years. The man who'd whispered about our future children since our third date. The man who came from a family where bloodlines and legacy meant everything. I drove home in silence that day, rehearsing what I would say, how I would tell him that I couldn't give him the one thing he wanted most. I even stopped to buy his favorite bourbon, Liquid Courage, for both of us. But when I walked through our front door, I heard voices coming from our bedroom. Daniel was home early, which never happened, and he wasn't alone. "You're sure?" "Absolutely sure." His voice sounded strange, tight with something I couldn't identify. "Yes, 10 weeks now." That was Rachel's voice, my husband's brother's wife, the woman who had been like a sister to me for the past decade. I stood frozen in our hallway, clutching that bottle of bourbon like a lifeline. Something primal in me already knew, but my conscious mind was desperately trying to construct alternative explanations. My brother can't ever know. No one can ever know. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "What are we going to do?" I heard Rachel sniffle. "I'm keeping it, Daniel. I've wanted a baby for so long, and Eric, he doesn't even touch me anymore. He'll believe it's his. He wants to believe it. And what am I supposed to do? Just pretend that's not my child? Watch my brother raise my baby?" Those words, my husband's words, they hit me like physical blows. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a whimper, because suddenly they went silent. I didn't wait. I walked in. The bottle slipped from my hand, not breaking, but rolling across our hardwood floor with a hollow sound that seemed to echo the emptiness forming inside me. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers, but the damage was done. Rachel's hand rested protectively on her stomach, the beginning of a bump I hadn't noticed before. Daniel's face drained of all color. "Megan," he started, but I just held up my hand. The words wouldn't come. How could they? What words exist for this moment? "I was just told today that I can't have children," I finally said, my voice eerily calm. Funny timing, isn't it? Their faces, God, their faces, horror, guilt, and underneath it all, relief. Relief that the secret was out, like they'd been waiting for this moment of discovery, waiting for me to free them from their deception. Rachel started crying, theatrical, heaving sobs, sobs that made me want to scream. "It just happened, Megan. We didn't mean for this. It just happened," I repeated. "What, you tripped and fell on my husband's dick multiple times, apparently?" Daniel moved toward me. "Baby, please let me explain." "Don't call me that," I whispered. "Don't you ever call me that again." I remember how still the room became then, how the afternoon light filtered through our bedroom curtains. Curtains I'd picked out when we first moved in, dreaming of the family we'd build here. The family I couldn't give him. The family he'd created with someone else. "How long?" I asked. They exchanged glances, and that simple look between them hurt more than anything else. It spoke of intimacy, of shared secrets, of betrayal so deep I could drown in it. 8 months, Daniel finally said, but it wasn't serious. I laughed then, a broken sound. It scared even me. "Not serious? She's carrying your child. Our niece or nephew will actually be your daughter or son. That seems pretty serious to me." Rachel stepped forward, reaching for me. "Megan, we never meant to hurt you." And that's when I felt the air leave my lungs, not in shock, but as if the very weight of the betrayal had collapsed my chest. My hands started to tremble, not from fear, but from fury I didn't know I was capable of. It wasn't just what they had done, It was that they did it so easily, so carelessly, like I was invisible in my own life. And that's when something in me snapped. Not in the way people talk about. I didn't scream or throw things. Instead, I felt something cold and hard crystallize in my chest, like ice forming over a lake in winter. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice steady. "Both of you. Now." They left. Not without protests, not without tears. Theirs, not mine, but they left. And I sat down on my bedroom floor, our bedroom floor, and felt something shift inside me. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the door they'd just walked through, half expecting it to open again and reveal it had all been a nightmare. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. It was the echo of trust shattering, of a future erased. The pain was there, massive and crushing, but beneath it something else was forming. Something with teeth and claws. Something patient. Because in that moment, I knew with absolute clarity they would pay for this. Both of them. I just needed to wait for the right moment. The next few weeks were a special kind of hell. The kind where you have to smile at family dinners while watching your husband avoid eye contact with his brother. The kind where your mother-in-law can't stop gushing about finally becoming a grandmother, never knowing that her own son, my husband, was the father. I stayed. That surprises people when I tell this story. Why didn't I leave immediately, file for divorce, make a scene? Because revenge served cold requires patience. And I wanted my revenge to be ice cold. So I played the part of the supportive sister-in-law. I listened to Rachel's pregnancy complaints with a fixed smile. I nodded sympathetically when she talked about how Eric, my brother-in-law, her husband, the man she was betraying in the most fundamental way possible, was just so busy with work and not really connecting with the pregnancy journey. All while Daniel watched from across the room, his eyes pleading with me to keep quiet, to protect his secret. 3 weeks after my discovery, Rachel announced they were having a girl. I watched as my mother-in-law cried happy tears. I watched as Eric proudly put his hand on Rachel's growing belly, claiming paternity of a child that wasn't his. I watched as Daniel excused himself and disappeared into the bathroom for 20 minutes. Later that night, Daniel tried to talk to me for the first time about it all. "I don't know what to do," he whispered in our dark bedroom, thinking I was asleep. "That's my daughter, Megan. My daughter." I said nothing, my back to him, eyes wide open. "I made a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life," he continued. "But how can I walk away from my own child?" It took everything in me not to turn and scream at him, not to remind him that we could have had children through other means. Adoption. Surrogacy. If biology was so important to him. Instead, he had chosen to create a child with my sister-in-law in the most tangled, destructive way possible. I lay there, stiff and silent, as if even the mattress would betray me if I moved. The weight of what he'd said pressed against my ribs, against my heart. Not just the words, but the way he said them, as if I no longer existed. As if the child he created through betrayal suddenly justified everything. And worst of all, in that split second, a part of me, the weakest, most broken part, wanted to reach for him. To pretend I hadn't heard. To cling to the familiar warmth of the man I once loved, even though he had burned it all down. That flicker of weakness shamed me more than his words. 2 days later, Rachel called me, asked me to meet her for coffee. I agreed, curious what possible explanation she could offer. We sat in a quiet corner of a cafe I used to love. Now, like so many things, it was tainted. "I need you to understand something," she said, stirring her decaf latte nervously. "Daniel and I, it wasn't love, it was comfort. Eric had been so distant, so cold. And Daniel, he was hurting too." "Hurting?" I repeated. "Because of the fertility issues? He felt like a failure, like less of a man?" I stared at her, speechless. She was trying to blame me for their affair. Because my body had failed us, Daniel had sought comfort in her arms, in her bed. "So this is my fault," I finally managed. No, that's not what I meant." She reached for my hand. I pulled away. "I just want you to know, it wasn't some grand love affair. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." "A mistake you're keeping," I said, nodding toward her belly. Her eyes filled with tears. "I can't not keep her, Megan. I've wanted a baby for so long, and Eric, does he deserve this deception?" She looked down. "Eric and I haven't been intimate in almost a year. He knows this baby isn't his. He doesn't know it's Daniel's." Another layer of betrayal. Another lie. But this information, this was useful. There was something twistedly empowering in her confession. Not because I pitied her, but because I realized how messy their web of lies had become. The more tangled it was, the easier it would be to rip apart. What broke me most in the following weeks wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the silence of those who should have spoken up. Daniel's parents, who noticed the tension but chose to ignore it for the sake of family harmony. Our friends, who saw my pain but offered nothing but awkward platitudes. Daniel himself, who began sleeping in the guest room but made no move to actually leave, to face what he'd done. I gave everything to this family. I hosted Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas parties. I visited my father-in-law daily during his cancer treatment when no one else could face it. I was the one who organized our family reunion last summer, who remembered everyone's birthdays, who kept this fractured family together with sheer will and love, and they discarded me like I was nothing. I wasn't just mourning a marriage, I was mourning the version of myself that had held everything together for so long. And no one noticed she was gone. The final straw came when Rachel asked me, to host her baby shower. Right in front of the whole family at Sunday dinner. "You're just so good at organizing these things, Megan," she said, her hand resting on her now prominent belly, "and your house is so much bigger than ours." Everyone nodded encouragingly, even Daniel. That coward mumbled something about it being a nice gesture. A nice gesture to host a party celebrating the child my husband conceived with another woman, the child I couldn't have in my own home. I smiled, I nodded, I agreed. And that's when I knew exactly how I would make them pay. "I'll need about a month to plan," I said, reaching for my planner as if this were any normal family event. "Let's say April 12th. That gives me time to really make it special." Rachel clapped her hands in delight. "You're the best, Megan. I knew I could count on you." Yes, they could all count on me, to be the reliable one, the supportive one, the one who would smile through pain and never make a scene. But not anymore, because I gave everything to them, and they tossed me aside like I was nothing. It was time they learned just who they were dealing with. Planning Rachel's baby shower became my obsession. Not because I wanted it to be perfect in the traditional sense, but because it needed to be perfect for what I had in mind. Every detail, every invitation, every decoration, all of it building to a moment that would change everything. But first, I needed information. Evidence. Power. Daniel and I were living as strangers in our own home. He tiptoed around me, clearly afraid I'd finally snap and expose everything. He didn't know that I had much bigger plans than a simple emotional outburst. I started by gaining access to his phone, not by stealing it or hacking it. That would be too obvious. Instead, I suggested we link our accounts to make family planning easier. He agreed eagerly, probably thinking this meant I was forgiving him, moving forward. In reality, it gave me access to his location history, his cloud storage, and his message backups. What I found was worse than I imagined. The affair hadn't started during our fertility struggles, as Rachel had implied. It had been going on for nearly 2 years, since before we even started trying for a baby. There were hotel receipts, intimate messages, even videos. I couldn't bring myself to watch, but the most valuable thing I found was a series of emails between Daniel and a lawyer, emails discussing how to protect his assets in case of divorce. Emails dated just 3 weeks after we found out I couldn't conceive. Naturally, he'd been planning his exit strategy while holding my hand through doctor's appointments. I took screenshots of everything, printed key documents, stored it all in a secure cloud account only I could access. Next, I paid a visit to my own lawyer, not the family lawyer Daniel and I had used for years, but someone new, someone sharp, with a reputation for handling high-profile divorces with minimal mess and maximum advantage to her clients. "What do you want out of this, Megan?" she asked me during our first meeting. "Everything," I replied simply. "The house, half his business, and for them to never forget what they did." She nodded, no judgment in her eyes. "The financial aspects are straightforward, given what you've shown me. The emotional satisfaction, that's trickier from a legal perspective." I smiled. "Leave that part to me." My next step involved Eric, my brother-in-law, Rachel's husband, the unknowing victim in this twisted scenario. I invited him to lunch, something casual, just family checking in on family. "How are you holding up?" I asked him over sandwiches. "Excited about becoming a dad?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Sure, it's what Rachel wants." "But what do you want, Eric?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the pain he'd been hiding. "I want my wife to look at me the way she used to, before everything." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I understand. More than you know." I didn't tell him that day. I wasn't ready yet. But I planted seeds of doubt, carefully, subtly, asked questions about the baby's due date, mentioned genetic traits that ran in Daniel's side of the family, traits that might eventually show up in his supposed daughter. Each word I chose was intentional. Each question delivered with casual softness, like poison wrapped in silk. I wasn't trying to destroy Eric, but I needed him to start questioning the world he thought he knew. Because if the truth came from me, it would look like vengeance. But if it came from within him, it would feel like awakening. Over the following weeks, I continued my preparations while playing the role of supportive sister-in-law. I ordered decorations for the baby shower, soft pinks and golds, Rachel's preferred color scheme. I arranged for catering from her favorite restaurant. I even handwrote invitations to 30 female friends and family members. Everyone commented on how brave I was, how generous, how selfless. If only they knew. 2 weeks before the shower, I had a private meeting with Daniel's business partner, Michael. I'd always had a good relationship with him. We'd had couples dinners together for years. Our spouses were friends. He was surprised by my invitation to meet without Daniel, but agreed. "I need to know something," I said after we'd exchanged pleasantries, "and I need your complete honesty." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Of course, Megan. What's going on?" "Did you know about Daniel and Rachel?" His face fell. The answer was clear before he spoke. I suspected. Daniel was careless a few times, taking long lunches when she happened to be downtown, leaving events early when she did. I hoped I was wrong. I nodded slowly. "And you never thought to tell me? Or Eric?" He looked down at his coffee. "It wasn't my place. I thought it would burn out. These things usually do. Except now there's a baby involved," I said flatly. Michael's head snapped up. "The baby is... Oh, God. Yes, and I need your help." Michael, as it turned out, had his own reasons for resenting Daniel. My husband had been leveraging their friendship to take credit for Michael's work for years, small slights that built into deep resentment, and Michael had documentation, emails, project files, meeting recordings. I didn't need to ask twice. There was something almost gleeful in the way he offered the files, as if finally someone had given him permission to stop being silent. We were both casualties of Daniel's arrogance, and now we were allies in exposing him. That would be very useful to me. A week before the shower, I visited Rachel's mother, a lovely woman who had always treated me like a daughter. She was beside herself with excitement about becoming a grandmother. "I'm so happy you and Rachel have stayed close through all this," she said as she showed me the tiny clothes she'd been buying. Fertility issues can create such distance between sisters. I smiled and nodded, letting her believe the fiction that Rachel had created, that my withdrawal over recent months was just pain over my infertility, not knowledge of her daughter's betrayal. Before I left, I casually mentioned, "Rachel's so lucky to have a daughter. There's that genetic heart condition on Eric's side that affects male babies." "Isn't there?" Her brow furrowed. "What heart condition? There's nothing like that in their family." "Oh, I must be mistaken," I said quickly. I could have sworn Daniel mentioned something about Eric's father having a heart issue that can be passed down through the male line. Another seed planted. 3 days before the shower, I had one last task. I visited Dr. Adams, my gynecologist, and asked for my complete medical records. She provided them without question. Then I asked something unusual. "The diagnosis you gave me, is there any chance it was a mistake?" She looked confused. "We ran the tests twice, Megan. I know it was difficult news. Could I have conceived before the condition developed? Say 6 months ago?" Understanding dawned in her eyes. She thought I was bargaining, grasping for hope. "It's extremely unlikely, but not medically impossible. However, you would know if you'd been pregnant." "Of course," I said, tucking the medical records into my bag, just checking all possibilities. I walked out of her office with a folder of truths I already knew, but for a moment I had let myself believe, just for a second, that maybe I'd missed something. Maybe fate had thrown me a curve I didn't catch. The thought embarrassed me, but it also revealed how deep the wound still was. I wasn't just seeking proof. I was seeking a reason to believe I hadn't been completely erased as a woman. As I drove home, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in months. Everything was in place. The invitations sent, the decorations purchased, the catering confirmed, the evidence compiled. I had given them everything. My love, my trust, my loyalty, and they had discarded me, betrayed me, humiliated me. Now it was their turn to lose everything. The night before the shower, Daniel tried once more to talk to me, to explain, to justify. "I know I can never make this right," he said, his voice breaking. "But I want you to know how sorry I am." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in weeks. This man I had loved, this man I had trusted with my heart, my future, my dreams. "I know you are," I said softly, "and tomorrow, everyone else will know too." He didn't understand my meaning. He thought I was threatening a scene at the baby shower, some emotional outburst that could be managed, contained, forgotten. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. The morning of the baby shower dawned sunny and clear, perfect weather for destroying lives. I got up early, setting up the decorations with meticulous care. Pink and gold balloons, a table for gifts, a beautiful cake with "Welcome Baby Girl" written in elegant script. Everything picture perfect. Daniel watched me nervously from the periphery, clearly waiting for me to break down or lash out. I simply smiled and suggested he make himself scarce for the afternoon. "This is a ladies' event," I reminded him. "Why don't you go golfing with Eric? I'm sure he could use the distraction." The relief on Daniel's face was almost comical. He thought he was getting a reprieve. By noon, the house was transformed. By 1, the catering was set up. And by 2, the guests started arriving. Friends, family, colleagues. Women bearing gifts and excited smiles, ready to celebrate new life. Rachel arrived last, escorted by her mother and mine. She looked radiant in a pale pink maternity dress, her hands constantly resting on her 7-month bump. She embraced me, whispering "thank you" in my ear with what seemed like genuine emotion. I hugged her back and whispered, "You're welcome. I've made this day very special." For the first hour, everything proceeded normally. We played ridiculous baby shower games. We ate dainty sandwiches and fruit tarts. We watched Rachel open gift after gift, cooing over tiny outfits and practical baby items. Then came the moment I'd planned for. The moment everything would change. "Before we have cake," I announced, standing at the front of the room, champagne flute in hand, "I'd like to make a toast and share something special." 30 pairs of eyes turned to me, expectant, unsuspecting. When Rachel asked me to host her baby shower, I was overcome with emotion. Sympathetic nods all around. This past year has been challenging for me, as many of you know. Finding out I couldn't have children naturally was devastating. Rachel's face paled slightly. She knew what I couldn't have, yet she'd taken what wasn't hers to take. "But today isn't about my journey," I continued. "It's about celebrating new life, new beginnings." I raised my glass to Rachel and her beautiful baby girl. Everyone raised their glasses. Everyone drank. Everyone relaxed, thinking the moment of potential awkwardness had passed. Then I added, "And what better way to celebrate than with some entertainment?" I've put together a little presentation. I clicked a remote and the large TV on our living room wall came to life. A slideshow began. Pictures of Rachel throughout her pregnancy, pictures of our family together at holidays, pictures that made everyone smile. Until the slideshow shifted. Suddenly, there were screenshots of text messages between Daniel and Rachel, explicit, unmistakable, dated, showing a timeline of betrayal that spanned years. Gasps filled the room. Rachel dropped her glass. It shattered on our hardwood floor, juice spreading like blood. "Megan, turn it off," she screamed. But I didn't. Instead, I kept narrating, calmly. "As you can see, my husband and my sister-in-law have been having an affair for quite some time, long before any fertility issues arose in our marriage." Another slide. Hotel receipts. Dates and times. They were quite thorough in their deception. The room had gone from shocked silence to horrified murmuring. Rachel's mother had her hand over her mouth. My mother-in-law was shaking her head in denial. "But the most interesting part," I continued, clicking to the next slide, medical records, highlighted and annotated, "is that the baby Rachel is carrying is not, in fact, my husband's child." This caused an even greater uproar. Rachel stood up, shaking. "What are you talking about? Of course it's—" She stopped herself, realizing what she was about to admit. "It's—" "What, Rachel? Your husband's?" "My husband's?" I tilted my head. "Let's be clear about parentage, shall we?" I clicked again, revealing a DNA test, because according to this, it's neither. The DNA test was fabricated, of course, a prop in my carefully constructed theater. But Rachel didn't know that. No one did. All they saw was scientific-looking documentation with names and percentages. "That's a lie," Rachel screamed. "That's impossible." "Is it?" I asked calmly. "You've been sleeping with at least 2 men. Are you certain? There wasn't a third? Your yoga instructor, perhaps? The one you've been having private sessions with 3 times a week?" This was another calculated shot in the dark. But judging by the way all color drained from Rachel's face, I'd hit another bullseye. There was a third man. I hadn't actually known until that very moment. But her reaction confirmed everything. The beautiful thing about liars is that they never know what's true and what isn't. They lose track of their own deceptions. And I had spent weeks waiting for these cracks to show, playing my part with a smile so calm it could be mistaken for forgiveness. But underneath that calm was strategy. Every glance, every word carefully placed like dominoes leading to this moment. Just then, the front door opened, right on cue. Eric walked in, followed by Daniel and a few other male family members. I'd texted them all an hour earlier, suggesting they surprise the ladies by joining for cake. "What's going on?" Eric asked, taking in the frozen tableau of horrified women and the damning evidence still displayed on the TV screen. I smiled at him. "Perfect timing, Eric. We were just discussing your baby's parentage." Daniel lunged for the remote in my hand. "Megan, stop this right now." "Why, Daniel? Aren't you proud of your work? Your deception? Your plans to divorce me now that you found out I can't give you children?" I clicked again, revealing the emails with his lawyer. "You were so thorough in documenting everything else." Eric was staring at the screen, at the messages between his wife and his brother. His face went from confusion to comprehension to rage in the span of seconds. "You son of a," he growled, launching himself at Daniel. What followed was chaos. The 2 brothers grappling with each other, while women screamed and backed away. Rachel was crying hysterically. Her mother tried to comfort her while simultaneously demanding answers. My mother-in-law collapsed into a chair, looking shell-shocked. The room was no longer a celebration, it was a reckoning. And I stood at the center of it all, not as a victim, but as the architect of consequence. And through it all, I stood calmly, watching the destruction I'd orchestrated. Eventually, someone called for the fighting to stop. The men were separated. Daniel's lip was bleeding. Eric was being restrained by 2 cousins. "There's more," I said into the tense silence. Daniel and Rachel weren't just betraying me and Eric. They were betraying all of you, our families, our friends. I clicked again, revealing more documents. Daniel has been embezzling from the family business for years, setting up accounts in the Cayman Islands, planning his escape. This part was true. It was what Michael had helped me discover. Daniel's father stood up, his face ashen. "Is this true?" he demanded of his son. Daniel couldn't even look him in the eye. "And Rachel," I continued, "has been systematically isolating Eric from his friends and family while spending his money on her extracurricular activities, including fertility treatments she told him weren't working." More truth, pieced together from conversations with Eric and bank statements he'd shown me during our lunch. "You're all wondering why I would air this dirty laundry in such a public way," I said, looking around the room at the shocked faces. "Why not handle it privately with dignity?" I walked over to the gift table and picked up a large, beautifully wrapped package. Because they took from me privately. They lied to me privately. They planned to discard me privately. I handed the package to Rachel, and I believe that kind of betrayal deserves a public response. With trembling hands, she unwrapped it. Inside was a folder, thick with legal papers, divorce filings. I explained to the room, for both me and Eric, already prepared, already signed by him. As of this morning, though, he didn't know the full story. Until now. "All that's needed is Daniel's signature. And yours, Rachel." Eric nodded grimly from across the room. He'd known something was coming today. He'd known I had evidence of the affair. He just hadn't known the extent of the deception. or that I plan to reveal it so publicly. You'll find the terms are non-negotiable, I continued. Daniel loses his share in the family business. I get the house. Eric gets full financial disclosure and a very favorable settlement. And you too? I looked between Daniel and Rachel. You get each other. Though I wonder for how long, now that the excitement of sneaking around is gone. Daniel stepped forward, his face a mask of fury and humiliation. You planned all of this. Set us up. No, Daniel, you did that all by yourself. I turned to address our audience. Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us today. The cake is delicious, and I encourage you to take some home. This party is over. One by one, the guests filed out. Some stopped to hug me. Others couldn't look me in the eye. Daniel's mother paused in front of me, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Megan. I had no idea. I squeezed her hand. I know. Neither did I. For too long. When almost everyone had gone, leaving just the central players in this drama, Daniel finally found his voice again. You didn't have to do it this way, he said, his voice low and angry. You've destroyed everything. I looked at him for a long moment, this man I once loved with my whole heart. No, Daniel, you destroyed everything. I just made sure everyone knew who was holding the match. It's been 18 months since the baby shower that changed everything. 18 months of rebuilding, of finding myself again in the rubble of what was once my life. People ask me if I regret what I did, the public nature of the exposure, the calculated destruction. I don't. Not for a second. There are consequences to betrayal, and Daniel and Rachel deserved every bit of what came their way. The baby was born a month after the shower, a little girl with dark hair and olive skin that matched neither Daniel's family nor Eric's. Rachel's yoga instructor disappeared around the same time, moving suddenly to the West Coast. Draw your own conclusions. Daniel tried to contest the divorce, but the evidence was too overwhelming, especially the embezzlement. His father was devastated, not just by the betrayal of his daughter-in-law, but by his son's theft from the family business. In the end, Daniel lost everything: his share of the company, his family's respect, and any claim to the fortune he'd been building. Rachel fared no better, abandoned by Daniel when he realized the baby wasn't his. Rejected by her family for her deception, she moved back to her hometown. Last I heard, she's living with her grandmother, working as a receptionist, raising her daughter alone. Eric and I remained friends through it all. There's something bonding about surviving that kind of betrayal together. He's dating again now, a kind woman who appreciates him for who he is, not what he can provide. As for me, I kept the house. Redecorated, it completely exorcised every trace of Daniel from the space. I also started my own consulting business, using contacts I'd made through years of supporting Daniel's career. Turns out, I have quite a talent for strategic planning. Who knew? And 6 months ago, I got a call from an adoption agency, a young mother who couldn't keep her baby, a little boy who needed a home. It wasn't the path to motherhood I had imagined. But standing in his nursery now, watching him sleep, I know, it's exactly where I'm supposed to be. There's a softness in the way he breathes, a rhythm that quiets even the loudest memories. I used to stare at pregnancy tests and cry. Now I stare at his tiny chest rising and falling and feel nothing but awe. He is mine, not by blood, but by fate. And in him I found a love untouched by betrayal. Daniel reached out once, about a year after everything fell apart. Asked if we could talk. Said he missed me. Said he'd made a terrible mistake. I didn't respond. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Some wounds don't heal. And some people don't deserve a second chance to inflict them. My son stirs in his crib, his tiny fists reaching up as he wakes. I lift him, breathe in his sweet baby scent, and feel a peace I never thought I'd find again. He curls into me like I'm his entire world, and maybe in that moment, I am. I don't think about what I lost anymore. I think about what I've built, what I've survived. Still, there are nights when the silence creeps in, and I wonder, not with longing, but with quiet grief, how much of myself was lost in the fire I had to walk through. Winning doesn't mean you leave unscarred, and even justice, when served cold, doesn't fill the void left by trust betrayed. The thing about betrayal is that it shows you who people really are, not just the betrayers, but everyone around you. Those who stay, those who stand by you, those who show up with pizza and wine on the nights when the silence in your empty house is too much to bear. I learned who my real family is. And it wasn't the one I married into. Sometimes I think about that day. The perfectly arranged flowers, the carefully selected decorations, the shocked faces as years of deception were laid bare. I think about the sound of glass shattering on hardwood. The way Daniel's face crumpled when he realized he'd lost everything. The moment when Rachel understood that her carefully constructed house of lies was collapsing. I don't feel joy at those memories, but I do feel justice, a sense that the universe balanced its scales, however imperfectly. They say living well is the best revenge. I disagree. The best revenge is truth, stark, undeniable, public, the kind that doesn't just hurt in the moment, but changes the story people tell about you forever. They took what wasn't theirs to take. They lied. They schemed. They betrayed. And in the end, they lost everything that mattered. While I, broken, betrayed, discarded, found my way back to wholeness, on my own terms. Dear friend, if you've come this far, I want to thank you for walking through this story with me. There's a Stoic saying I held close during my darkest days. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. I couldn't control betrayal, but I could control what I did with the pain. I chose clarity, I chose truth, and I chose to reclaim my life. We all face moments that try to break us, but when you choose not to break, when you choose to rebuild instead, you become something stronger, quieter, and more powerful than before. So if you're hurting, doubting, or standing at the edge of your own fire, keep going. You're not alone, and you're far more capable than you think. Live with intention, speak with truth, and rise, always, with quiet fire. And if this story touched you in any way, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Your support means the world, and it helps us continue bringing real, powerful stories to life.